This episode is sponsored by the Soul of Business Experience, a leadership community with curated resources for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their careers. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. You know, the title of the show is The Soul of Business. And one of the themes that, in over 250, some odd, we're coming up close to 300 episodes now, that I've continuously come back to is how do we manage to disconnect from that founding font, that soul of the business that actually brought the creativity, the spark of innovation, the passion. How did we lose connection with that? And how do we lose connection? And even more importantly, how do we regain it? Because if we're looking at the viability and long-term success, we have to be able to tap into that because in my experience, it is the secret sauce that makes who we are as an organization different from anybody else, even in the same space, doing the same things. You know, it's our unique footprint, our unique thumbprint. Now, I use that as kind of a preface for my guest today, New York Times bestselling author. She's appeared, and she's a regular contributor at Harvard Business Review, which I've subscribed to HBR since the I'm going to date myself here, since the late 1970s, early 1980s.
Since it came on stone tablets.
Yeah, it came in stone tablets. But you've been on CNN, NPR, USA Today, Globe and Mail, Forbes. Liane Davey is an author. She's also, more importantly than an author, she is a legitimate expert on on team development, on team process, on how organizations actually function. And it's the team that actually is the unit that makes things happen in an organization. And I'm very fond of saying that all an organization is a collection of people in a relationship. And if the relationships are working well, you got a pretty good shot at being successful. Most leaders today don't know how to handle relationship dynamics particularly well. And not for lack of trying, but because a lot of things get in the way and they're really not taught how to do it. I mean, there's not a relationship 101 in B school.
Mm-hmm.
And
true.
In any business school I've ever taught in or been associated with, there's not a relationship piece in it. So Liane Davey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Blaine. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
As am I. I mean, when your publicist I kind of floated this across my desk. I went, ooh, yep. Get her on the show here. So my team was real good in getting you set up here. I typically will ask, a formal question. It's the only one that sometimes I ask, sometimes I don't. But when you hear the term the soul of business, what does that bring up for you, particularly in the context of what you're doing and what you write about?
Yeah. Oh, I like that question. It's the intangible humanness. I loved your use of the word font, right? It's the font of inspiration, the font of connection, the font of meaning. Everything kind of springs from that font that is the soul. And it's so interesting because it's the stuff that we ignore at our peril, right? We're so busy thinking about the cognitive part of work. Sometimes we talk about the emotional part, but we don't get down to the soul of it all, which is beneath everything.
Yeah. Now, you've done a lot of work with, as have I. So we actually share a couple of clients here, but Amazon, Walmart, RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, MD Anderson, Google. I mean, I could go on and on and on. You've got a pretty extensive portfolio of clients with whom you've worked. And where I'm going with this particular question has to do with a lot of the work that you position can be seen as soft skills. That's the soft stuff. And in those organizations, and I've really run into this myself, performance is that's what we pay attention to. And performance is, hard nosed. It's kind of like, you either do it or you're out, we got grading and all that stuff that kind of comes into play. Number one, how do you position what you're doing so that it makes sense to the people, with whom, the sponsors that bring you in? But secondly, what's the typical pushback you get when you start opening Pandora's box here a little bit?
So the way I position it is to simply say our firm, a firm that exists to help people achieve amazing things together, period. Right? It's not to help everybody get along. right? It is the outcome. What is it you want to achieve? What do you want to bring to the world? And if that's something you can't do alone, then you're probably going to need some help with how to achieve that amazing thing together. So that's how I talk about it. In terms of pushback, well, certainly talking about the emotional side of it, when you talk about that, people kind of like, this is business, it's not personal, that sort of thing. But it really only takes 5 to 10 minutes, any real meeting, any real boardroom for the emotions to hijack the actual decision making, and then my job is done for me. Because it's so interesting. There's so many ways in which emotions affect our ability to make decisions, to connect, to see opportunity, or to perceive risk, all the things that leaders need to do. And we've gotten to this point of thinking about emotions or talking about emotions as, somebody being upset or crying or like, you know what? That's one tiny bit of the emotional range. Getting frustrated, feeling defensive, being very aggressively pushing your agenda. All of these are kind of emotional hijack situations that detract from the ability to look at the environment, see the opportunities, see the risks, make the hard trade-offs. Like strategy is a very human process. And so they understand they need a strategy that creates competitive advantage. And as soon as they see all the ways that our humanness is interfering with optimal strategy, they're like, oh, now we know why you're here.
Yeah. Come on in.
Come on in, sit down, get comfortable. Yeah.
Well, you open up a little bit here. The emotions just exist. I mean, it's part of the human makeup. It's kind of how we're
It's in
wired.
our operating system.
It is.
You're not taking it out.
The idea of emotional intelligence, is steeped in awareness. Awareness is the foundational element of emotional intelligence. Awareness of self as well as awareness of others in the situation.
Yes.
What are some processes or ways that you can actually begin to trigger people's awareness about how emotions, the legitimate generative use of emotions, can boost performance rather than trying to put keep the emotions out of it?
One of the most important things that I've learned is that, first of all, we are very emotionally illiterate. We don't have good language for emotions. And as humans, if we don't have good language for things, we aren't very good at manipulating them. So we first need better language. So we need to differentiate between an emotion, which is a pre-conscious, complex physiological reaction to our environment. And that is different than a feeling. And a feeling is that cognitive narrative and story we wrap around to explain or rationalize the experience we're having in our body. So the first thing I want to help people do is understand the difference between non-negotiable emotion and the very negotiable, often very fallible, flawed feeling. So how do we extract the data from the emotion? So intuition is a real thing. So if we're working on strategy and we're talking about an option or an opportunity, I can just see someone getting uncomfortable. Like they've gone quiet, maybe they've dropped eye contact. I can see there's something in their gut. The reason they're not talking is they probably don't know what it is. They've had the emotion. They haven't yet got the story to rationalize it. And so they're just, in our business culture, we're staying quiet. But if I see it, I can say, oh, something going on? What's going on? How are you thinking about this? How do you see this playing out? One of my favorite questions, what mistake are we about to make? And then they can start to tap into, and they may start by just saying, I don't really know, but something's not sitting right, or something is off, right? And so starting to model and teach them to trust that there's data in those emotions and they can explore those data, learn from them without having to be vulnerable to those dramatic feelings and stories. If we can cut in, interrupt, the good base emotional data, we can preclude the drama. And then they start to learn that there's something valuable there, and they don't have to be so afraid of. That's very important.
Yeah. Which, I mean, fast forward with, particularly emotional content, people generally don't have, in my experience, difficulty sharing effusive emotion, happy emotions, emotions. I mean, things where things are going well. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm having a good day today. It's where I've got an issue with, Bob over here, and it's festered for 6 months. And I mean, all that. So as a manager, I love this quote in your new, and we're going to talk about your new book, but I love this opening quote that was provided to me. As a manager, you're burdened not just by your own, thought load. And I want to unbundle that word here. You're burdened not just by your own thought load, but by every team member's thought load as well. Everyone you contact is in the same boat. Their attention is divided, and we're going to talk about that one. That's really, I think, fascinating here. Their nerves are frayed and their tanks are empty. Managers are the most leveraged role in the organization, and it's also the most overlooked. You're expected to be productive, empathetic, strategic, decisive, and you're often left to figure it out by yourself.
Does that ring true for you? Does that feel like what you...
Oh, definitely. At one point in time, I mean, I can recall literally when I was running a team in Japan, it's kind of like, I don't know what the hell to do here. And That's kind of like, let me just drop. Yeah. And one of my old company that I worked with years ago, back in the 1970s, the CEO of the president of the company said, as I was taking over a new position, he said, just drop bombs and see what ends up happening. I'm going, okay.
Well, 70s management. That didn't survive. That strategy didn't survive.
That did not, and it almost cost me some significant capital. But the point here has to do specifically around conflict. Most managers are very adverse to surfacing conflict. They understand that it may be present. And where I'm going with this has to do with how the soul of the business gets capped, how it actually becomes divorced from everything else. It's because we don't speak about the things that are not working. We, what you could call it, cordial hypocrisy.
Oh, that's a good term.
Yeah, it's
there's a lot of that.
Oh, yeah. So how do you actually work with your clients, particularly on the teams, and I'm making an assumption here, to understand that conflict is not to be walked away from. It's not to be ignored. It's actually a very valuable emotional state that if we can leverage it well, we open up possibilities that we actually were blind to because we weren't speaking about it.
Yeah. So I differentiate. I know conflict is a noun, but I like to use conflict as a verb, that we conflict. Because I think what we have most in organizations, people are like, don't you think we have too much conflict? No, we have very, very little conflict if you think about it as a verb. What we have a lot of is grievance, which is a noun and a static, stuck, unhealthy, unproductive, toxic kind of thing. So, right? So we sit in our grievance and make no progress. It doesn't help us make better decisions, improve our relationships. And it is toxic to our soul, right? Grievance is toxic to a soul. Conflict, which is the process of moving from grievance to solution or to forward progress, it's uncomfortable, but it's very helpful. So that's the first thing. Really making sure people understand, no, you think that there's conflict in your organization, but for the most part, there's just grievance, which is all of the downside, no upside. There's nothing good that can come from it if you don't actually get the issue somewhere that we can be done with it. Okay, so how do I start? I start by helping people map out the productive conflict that should be in any deliberation on their team. So mostly we think that teamwork is supposed to be like rowing. Like we're all in the same boat, don't rock the boat, pull in the same direction, right? Terrible metaphor. Horrible. Rowing's a beautiful sport. Terrible metaphor for teamwork. And so instead, I help people think about it like, imagine all your stakeholders are sleeping in a tent. And your job is to take a small piece of plastic, a tarp, and tie ropes in the different corners and keep everybody sleeping in the tent dry. And so then you realize, I'm not pulling in the same direction as the other people. I'm in sales. I'm pulling this way. Ops is pulling in a different way. Marketing's pulling in a different way. And we never have a big enough tarp. There's never enough resources. But what we're trying to do is, bring the best of our expertise, pull in these different directions, gauge which way the wind is blowing, and make the optimal decision to keep everybody dry. So based on that metaphor, we do the exercise to say, okay, sales, what rope are you pulling on? What are you paying attention to that no one else is paying attention to? Which stakeholders are you advocating for? And therefore, what tension are you obliged to put on these deliberations? And then ask the same for marketing, ask the same for HR, ask the same for finance. And people begin to realize, oh, I'm thinking about a different stakeholder than you are. No wonder it sometimes gets tense, right? Or like, I have a completely different expertise than you. And if I don't pull my rope, that corner of the tent is not going to be covered. I'm in risk. I'm in legal. Right? I'm the supply chain guy. That's awesome that you can manufacture that. But if we can't get it to market, right? So that's where I always start, is helping people to understand that if we're going to have everybody sleep dry, when we never have enough resources, we're going to have to pull in different directions. We're going to have to dynamically listen to one another, learn from one another, figure out which way the wind is blowing, and come to the optimal trade-off. And the way most of our systems are built in modern organizations is people are paid and rewarded for how hard they pull their rope, which means the tarp is often nowhere near the tent, right? Or it's ripped in half, because we have not been able to imagine that what we need is, yes, someone to pull hard, because if we want this thing to be taut and the rain to fall off it, we need everybody pulling hard, but never so hard that we pull the whole thing off balance. Ultimately, it's, did I contribute my bit in the context of all these other wisdoms and advocacies so that everybody sleeps dry at the tent? And that mindset is just missing. But once people realize, before I walk into a meeting, I need to know what and whom I'm fighting for, everything changes.
See, that's where I think the soul of business can actually, serve as a very interesting catalyst. A lot of the work we do is organized around something that I call the for the sake of what. Literally, what matters. For the sake of what are we pulling on this corner?
Yeah. Exactly.
And it invites an exploration of a bigger picture. No, there's a tent under here we're trying to cover.
I tell the story in my book, The Good Fight. I tell the story of a food manufacturing company. And we asked these questions, and I asked the salesperson, what and whom are you fighting for the sake of what? And the salesperson said, well, for our customers, my stakeholders are customer. And in a food company, the customer is the most useless term ever. Because when he said customer, he meant the grocery stores. Right? He's like, for the sake of the grocery store, like, I'm thinking about what needs to be in their flyer. What else do they need in their category? How are they competing? What price level do they compete? Right? All those things. I'm like, oh, that's lovely. Okay. So I understand what you're fighting for, but what's marketing fighting for? And for the sake of what? Well, they're thinking about the purchaser, right? They've got the person who's going to drive to the store, the buyer. I see the flyer, I see the thing on the shelf, right? But they have a R&D, a marketing, a food development team. I'm like, for the sake of what? Well, for the sake of the consumer, for the sake of the person eating it. And you can immediately see what the grocery stores want is something that's stable on the shelf for months, right?
Yeah.
is easy to, in a box or with a hook, or easy to deal with, right?
Give me a Hussy Twinkie.
Exactly. Then often imagine you're selling, school lunch things, right? What the buyer wants is something nutritious to put into my kid, right? And also something easy. But what the kid wants is something yummy. So if we are having conflict around the table, it's not at all surprising, and it doesn't mean we're doing it wrong. it means that we've got to optimize for the grocer, the parents, and the kid and figure out what's the right set of trade-offs to get lunch in their bag, right? So, that's a really important thing for the sake of what, and everybody understanding the answer to that question.
Oh, and I love the tent metaphor. I truly do. I think that is I mean, yeah, did a lot of and still do a fair amount of camping here in the Pacific Northwest, and rain tarps are important.
They are, and you
So
can
I've got an
imagine.
experience.
Yeah, and that's where it came from, was taking my husband and I, when our kids were little, we took them camping and there was this massive storm. And, it was a literal story that my husband pulled too hard on his side and left our daughter face down in the mud. So that the story came out of a real story. But it's also one of those things where so many teams, they kind of stake the tarp and then the winds change and the rain's coming in at a different angle. That's business today. Think about tariffs and supply chain issues, that like all the stuff we've been facing. You can't just stake the tarp and walk away, go sit in your lounge chair. Productive conflict is very dynamic in this environment. Like, everybody pull up the tarp, winds are changing. What, I think in the food business, carbs are in, carbs are out, proteins in, proteins out. Like, okay, we're like,
Well, I mean, that opens up an interesting explorational area here around the distinction between, and this is a scarce resource conversation.
Yeah.
The scarcest resource, and this is something that you posit in the book, is that attention, not time, is the scarcest resource at work.
I love when people talk about time. I'm like, who has more time than anybody else? Like, time is an equal resource. Everybody's got the same amount. So when we fight about time, so it's like, what attention is going into that time? What energy is going into that time? How much do you make of that time? And I think what's different is some people take 1 hour and they are prepared to use that hour wisely. They have processed the emotional residue that was sitting with them, so it's not with them. They have fueled their bodies, had rest, so that 1 hour equates to significant productivity and effectiveness, while the person beside them hasn't turned off their notifications, right? Is trying to do 6 things at once, is still stewing about something that happened in the meeting yesterday, right? It's 2:00 and they're still riding off the banana nut muffin they had at 8:00. And that hour is going to yield something very different for them. And so I don't know why we keep talking about time, because time is a constant. But how do we think about what we get out of that time in 2 different dimensions? Yes, how much we produce in that time, productivity. But I am very worried that we are too obsessed with productivity and we're churning out a bunch of slop that doesn't move the needle on the outcomes that matter. So I don't want to just think about using that hour to be productive. How do we use that hour to be effective? But time, everybody's got the same amount.
Yeah. And it really does come down to energy follows attention, not intention, classic phrase. Yeah. And the idea of energy being actually the currency that we can actually look to assess how we're performing. Yeah. That whole idea.
Because it's circle, right? So how much energy, physical, cognitive, mental, spiritual energy we bring to the thing is going to change the outputs and outcomes we get in the time, which of course, the more meaningful contribution, the more insight, the more value, the more energized we become, right? But so many of us are on the vicious cycle, not the virtuous cycle. So I come in tired, I come in distracted, I come in carrying a bunch of emotional baggage. I get nothing done in the hour. I feel crappy about myself. People yell at me. They get more impatient, and right. So we have to be so much more deliberate about setting ourselves up to get more out of the hour. And if you think about your 40-hour week, have you set yourself up to not just produce in those 40 hours, but produce the things that move the needle on the outcomes that matter?
So all of this aggregated stuff that kind of bombards us, stuff. It's a technical term.
Yes, it is. Yes.
You've got and this is the title of your new book, which, for those of you that are interested, you can go to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, wherever all of this good.
Wherever fine books are sold. You can get it in digital. You can get it in paperback. You can have me narrating the audiobook. Anything you want.
There you go. And it's the title of it is Thought Load. Thought Load. Manage the madness and free your team to do great work. So when you're talking about thought load, what is it that you're actually talking about here?
So thought load is the invisible tax on our performance. So that's the first thing. That comes from a treacherous triad of three things. So if you think about the treacherous triad. So think about, I am a bit of a sucker for alliteration. So you think about the load. The load comes from two things: the rising cognitive demands. So decision fatigue. The stats on, we only work 11 minutes before we stop working on a task and move to another one. And we only return to the original task 25 minutes later. So even our interruptions are interrupted. We're toggling between 1,200 screens a day, interrupting ourselves with email every 5 minutes, notifications every 2 minutes, family life coming in all through our workday. So those are the rising cognitive demands. Now add to that load the emotional burdens. So the things we're worried about, the ways we're triggered, does the boss think I'm not good enough? Our imposter syndrome, our frustration with our colleagues, that together is the load. And then, right now, all of our ability to carry that load comes with the third factor, which is our energy reserves. And on days when we're high energy, the load feels manageable. Bring it on, I got this. But on days when that energy is low, even the slightest thing feels too much. So that's the treacherous triad. And the interesting thing is the neuroscience of thought load is that each one of those three factors amplifies and exacerbates the others. So as your energy reserves decline, your brain becomes terrible at calibrating what should I pay attention to and what should I not. So all of a sudden you're paying attention to too much. As your energy reserves decline, you become very poor at assessing, is that actually a threat? Is she really giving me a side eye? Does the boss really think I'm dumb? So each one amplifies the others, and our thought load then is this very expensive tax. So when we try and get work done in an hour where we have high thought load, we get very little done. When we go to a meeting with high thought load, we're not creative. We're not even very present. Our teammates start to feel we're not really there to help support the team. When we have dinner with high thought load with our families, they don't feel a connection. So high thought load detracts from how we live our whole lives.
Well, one of the things that you advocate in the book is something that you call here, and I'm going to just look at this, sabbatical for thinking.
Yeah, my favorite chapter.
Yeah, so sabbatical for thinking, how is it different from what most people may think of as a meditation break?
Yeah, so meditation breaks are great. They are one way to take a sabbatical from thinking. Many people who are very overwhelmed have high thought load, and I suggest meditation as a killer app for improving thought load because it's good for cognitive, emotional, and energy reasons. They just look at me, they're like, yeah, I tried that. I can't do that. I can't stop thinking. I can't. So in some ways, what I'm trying to do is the opposite, make room for thinking. So what happens now is you get up in the morning. From the minute you get up till the minute you go to bed, there's input at all times. The radio's on, you're listening to a podcast, the TV's in the background, you're in a meeting. There is never silence. There is never a chance to listen to the voice inside your head. From a neuroscience perspective, never a chance for the default mode network to turn on and create some insight. So the thinking sabbatical, I call it the 2-week cleanse. And the good news is it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to drink juice. But what you do have to do over a 2-week period is find 5 or 6 1-hour chunks of zero input. Preferably moving your body while you're doing it can really be helpful. So gardening for an hour, but just listening to the birds, walking, driving, doing a puzzle, woodworking, whatever it is that you fishing. People have known for millennia that fishing is the best way to process your thought load.
So I could not agree more.
Absolutely. That's why it's so good. Right? And
not for the fish necessarily, but for me.
It's true. It's all in the eye.
So there's a distinction between fishing and catching. So
that's true. That's true. And when I fish more than I catch.
Yeah, same here.
So what happens is that there is an absolute wealth of raw ingredients in our brain pantries. Almost too much. It's in there like raw ramen noodles. It's so tight packed in there, but nobody wants to eat that brick of raw ramen noodles. You got to, pour some water in it and just let it soak, right? And so the idea is that if you, over 2 weeks, find 5 or 6 1-hour chunks with no input, you'll start. I've been doing it in the last 2 weeks. And the first couple of days, it was very much a bunch of emotional stuff that I didn't know I'd been kind of shoving to the side. I was doing a book launch. I was very busy. So there was a bunch of emotional stuff I just kind of swept under the carpet. And so when I gave myself a couple of 1-hour chunks, I was processing that stuff. And then on the third day, it started to be more like some ideas I hadn't worked with, a client session, a keynote. So it's like, oh, I could connect that dot to that dot. And what if I wrote about this? So that's what's amazing. For the vast majority of us, we are not lacking ingredients in the brain pantry, but we are not nourished by them at all because there is no air involved. So that's when people say to me, it's not where the book starts, right? The book starts with understanding your outcome and all those things. But sometimes people say to me, like, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even do that first step. And I always say, then step 1 is do more nothing. And if you do more nothing, do this 2-week cleanse, this thinking sabbatical, I promise you'll have tons of great ideas. You'll have a chance to have processed those emotions, and you will have energy you haven't had in years.
This is how we connect folks that are listening here. This is not only how you connect to the soul of yourself, but it's also how you keep your people connected to the soul of your business. They need to have time to think. They need to have time to just kind of, and I love this, do more nothing.
Do more nothing. Yep.
And the visual metaphor, I mean, I spent 5 years in Japan, and I'm very familiar with the compact ramen.
Yeah.
Begins to expand. Is it, just a beautiful metaphor. That's what we're creating space for the content to actually, because I can't connect the dots when it's all packed.
There's so much in there. The pantry is full, but you have not allowed a single bit of air to touch any of it because we are and just watch people in a lineup. They're lining up at the gate at the airport, or they're lining up at the grocery store. Even if they're the next in line, the phone will come out. I can't stand in a line for 30 seconds without input. Like, it has become a huge problem. So you have to do it as like a juice cleanse. It's much more pleasant than a juice cleanse. But you do it as an event to retrain yourself. And so if a whole hour sounds painful, just say, I'm going to fold the laundry with no input. I'm going to spend 20 minutes. Just fold the laundry, right? I'm going to go out in my garden, whatever it is. But start to build up this ability to have air.
Yeah, for those of us that are performaholics.
Yeah.
Okay, the dog just saw a deer.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I did my your juice fast thing kind of triggered this.
Yeah.
I did my week long. I'm so good at this. I did my week long juice fast in 2 days.
That's awesome.
I just rocked it.
If only more was more, we'd be all set, right?
It would be. I can continue this conversation for a long, long time here, but I do want to close off with, you've got, just from a practical perspective, your 3 priority planning, psychological strategies to restructure time. So do more nothing. What are these, very simply and very quickly, 3 priority planning? What's the mechanism?
So one of the problems is when our thought load is high, and we have this single to-do list that's filled with the really meaningful things we need to do to achieve the outcomes of our role, plus all the other stuff everybody else is asking us to do to help them achieve their meaningful outcomes, plus a long list of side quests. When we have that really long single list and a heavy thought load, we choose the thing off the list for bad reasons. We often choose the thing attached to the scariest person. Right. This is the person who's going to yell at me, so I'm going to do this first. Might not be the most valuable thing. Or this is the most recent thing that came into my inbox. I'm just going to do this one right now. So 3 lists says, instead of 1 to-do list, you need 3 priority lists. The first list is the first, second, and third most important things you can do this week to advance your quest. The second list is the first, second, and third most important things you can do to support somebody else in your organization achieving their quest. And then the third list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many they are, side quests. And then what you want to do is not pick randomly, but look at your calendar in 3 different types of real estate. Focus and forge time, which is your best time, where you're most creative, most open, most energized, emotionally, spiritually, cognitively, and put your quest in there. The second set of time, your connect and collaborate time, I'm going to put my colleagues' work in there. And then that swampland of your calendar, Thursday at 4, in between meetings, put the side quest in there. But so often when I look at people's calendars, they're giving their most precious real estate to all the side quests, to responding to emails, to doing Slack things. And I think, are you trying to do your most important work, your most challenging, most frame-breaking work in the swampland of your calendar? And most people are. So we got to get away from 1 long to-do list. We got to understand that we have 3 separate lists, and they get different real estate in our calendar.
I love that. I love that. That's a great way to parse it. So
it's amazing how well it works, because then you're doing the really meaningful work at a time when you're more likely to get into flow, where you'll get that virtuous cycle of feeling like you got something done. And the side quests, you're doing the crappy stuff in a time where it's kind of crappy anyway. It's fine. It's not a way. You wouldn't have been good for anything else.
Exactly. So you may as well, hey,
yeah. Might as well do the compliance training for the 7th year in a row.
God, don't talk to me about compliance trainings. Folks, I've been talking to Dr. Liane Davey. Her new book, and you got to pick up a copy of it. I mean, it's really an entertaining read, number 1, but number 2, there's some really juicy content in here that is going to be, particularly if you're a mid-level manager or if you're managing anybody at any place in your life, this is something that you're going to want to work with. Thought Load is the title. The subtitle is Manage the Madness and Free Your Team to Do Great Work. Liane, people can find you where?
Thoughtload.com. And on that page, there may be something that people would enjoy. There's 2 really quick assessments. So one is you can measure your thought load and get a sense of which of the 3 pieces is contributing the most. Is it cognitive, emotional, or energy? And then the second little assessment that's super valuable is understanding your own particular breed of overwhelm, so that we give you very specific different recommendations depending on if you're a whirlwind when you're overwhelmed or a brooder or a stickler or a rogue. So those two things are on thoughtload.com, as well as a link to ThoughtWorld, which is a whole community of free resources you can use with your own teams, tools to download, work through to manage not only your thought load, but that of your entire team. So thoughtload.com will get you the good stuff. And then connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions.
Perfect. Dr. Liane Davey, thank you so much. You've been a delightful guest. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I was not exaggerating. I can continue this conversation for some time.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Me too. So nice to meet you, Blaine.
Yeah. You've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. As always, find a way to pretend like you're a part of nature. And what I mean by that is, there's nothing in nature that serves exclusively as a center of accumulation. Everything in nature serves as a center of distribution. Find a way to distribute something. Give a smile, give a hug, tip the bill, give something away, give a lot of stuff away. And you'll find that your life works a whole lot better. And we will see each other on the next episode. Blaine Bartlett, Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. Thank you for listening.
This episode is sponsored by the Soul of Business Experience, a leadership community with curated resources for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their careers. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.